Riot MMO is currently in development and there's lots of talk surrounding who the player is going to battle against as they explore Runeterra. This video will explore the best antagonist that Riot's made, one that poses a threat to the entire world. There are tons of villains within Runeterra. Whenever Riot adds a character to the roster in League of Legends, or a new expansion to Legends of Runeterra, they develop their lore through voice lines, colour stories and biographies. Whilst most of the characters and locations within Runeterra are meant to be morally grey, there's usually at least one antagonist to their own story. These antagonists come in all sorts of forms, from secret orders to criminal gangs, and even sometimes other playable champions. Whilst I'm sure we'll get to explore a lot of these individual conflicts within the MMO, very few are worthy of being the overarching villain of an entire MMO campaign. Because Riot's world is well established, there are antagonists which pose a threat to Runeterra as a whole. It's these villains that the player will have to fight throughout whole campaigns and expansions when the game is released. One such foe is present throughout Runeterra, and is an example of a perfect threat to face as the player plays through the game. This foe is the Darkin. A fan favourite villain within the lore of League of Legends, the Darkin are posing an ever-growing danger to the realm of Runeterra as they threaten to escape the shackles of their prisons which held them captive for thousands of years. The prisons in question are the weapons they once wielded as all-powerful, ascended god warriors. Before I explain why the Darkin are such a good MMO villain, let's backtrack a little bit. Who or what are the Darkin, and how did they come to pose such a huge threat to the realm of Runeterra? Our antagonist's tale starts with the Shuriman Empire, formerly a vast and thriving empire which encompassed a large part of the continent south of Valoran, Shurima. Their empire was vast and all-powerful, and owed a large part of its power to the Sun Disk, a device which allowed the empire to ascend mortals to god warriors. The Ascended, who would later refer to themselves as the Sunborn, were Shuriman god warriors who had been touched by the divine powers of the Celestials through a transcendent ritual using the Sun Disk. The humans selected for this ritual were often powerful in their own right, and were descended to near godhood, granting immortality and immense power, all the while serving the empire of Shurima. It's important to note that this ritual was not commonplace within Shurima. Hundreds, if not thousands, had taken part in the ritual and the vast majority of these were deemed unworthy. If this was the case, the participants would be turned into malformed and flawed beings known as the Bakai. Whilst these beings were not too dissimilar to their counterparts who had successfully ascended, they lacked the power that the Ascended had, and did not receive the gift of immortality either. It's for this reason that prior to the final time the Sun Disk would be used in the Ritual of Ascension, there had not been an attempted ascension in many centuries, and whilst there were quite a few ascended throughout different points in history, there was still a finite amount. So, how did the Sunborn God Warriors who ascended to serve Shurima turn against the Empire and embody pure evil? The Shuriman Empire became a force, in large part thanks to the power of the Sunborn. Their sheer strength and immortality made them formidable foes to face in battle, and stood as a strong deterrent to any opposing nations. However, although the Ritual of Ascension granted humans new bodies of immense power, their mortal, fragile minds remained as they were when they were human. After a war against the Void during the Battle of Acathia, this weakness was felt among the surviving Sunborn. After fighting and losing some of their brothers and sisters to the Void, some of the Ascended's minds began to corrupt. This corruption was compounded by the final nail in the coffin, the death of the Emperor of Shurima, and his failed ascension which decimated the lands of Runeterra. Having been touched by the corruption of the Void, and without direction from a leader, many of the Sunborn turned away from a righteous path, turning towards dark magics in order to gain power for themselves. Now, prior to the recent Legends of Runeterra expansion, we knew that it was from this point that the corrupted Ascended became the depraved and bloodthirsty creatures we knew as Darkin. Through flavor stories such as Twilights of the Gods, we learned that Celestials noticed the growing power of the Darkin, and gave humans the power to banish them into their own weapons, sealing them away for eternity. We also know that the recent resurgence of them within the world of Runeterra came from humans bowing to the powers within the weapons, and the presence of the Ascended would take over the wielder as its host. However, recent developments show that there is far more depth to the Darkin lore that we were previously aware of, specifically how they came to gain such power. At the start of League Season 2022, we were introduced to a new Ascended called Zalani. In life, Zalani was a powerful healer and was heavily worshipped by the Shuriman people. However, after the fall of Shurima, it was the now corrupted Zalani who would introduce the Darkin to the blood magic that we now associate with them. A lot of Rast's, Aatrox and Varus' power within the games come from them siphoning life and power from those that they kill. It was revealed to us that the priest Zalani is where the Darkin attained the power of siphoning and blood magic. But this is where the story gets interesting. While Zalani made all the other Darkin far more powerful through blood magic, She did so for her own personal gains. Once powered by blood magic, Zalani was able to manipulate and control the Darkin that she had empowered. Whilst other Darkin had turned evil to increase her own power, Zalani had twisted this lust for her own self-gain. We don't know yet as to what Zalani planned to do with the Darkin she was able to control, but I'm sure this is something we will either find out or explore during the MMO. Zalani's actions made her a common enemy of the Darkin, and as she was sealed alongside all the other Darkin, this hatred has been brewing for a very long time. Whilst in current canon she currently remains dormant, it would not surprise me if her awakening was a big plot point for the MMO, and she became a target for other Darkin throughout the world. Although we're now going deep into speculation, I believe that Zalani will be the final raid boss of this story arc. This is mostly off a hunch, but she's being set up to be extremely powerful, and her use of blood magic and backstory has real MMO raid boss vibes. Zalani is but one of the known Darkin that exists within the universe. Whilst I won't break down all of their stories, there's so much potential to explore their storylines within the MMO for reasons I'll get into now, as I'll explain why I believe the Darkin are a perfect MMO villain. Firstly, if you haven't gathered already, they have excellent lore. Not only is it kind of badass to have an all-powerful being trapped inside their own weapon that then consume the wielder, but they also tell a powerful tale of power and how the misuse of it can lead to devastation. To me, the coolest part about their lore is that you can tell the story of the Darkin through visual storytelling within the game. The shrines dedicated to the former selves, the shattered sun disk, the lingering void in Shurima, their prisons guarded by humans for centuries, and finally the chaos and devastation they've caused once unleashed. This brings me to another point. Although a lot of Darkin's history was set in Shurima, they now stand a threat to the whole of known Runeterra. For example, Aatrox, the Darkin general, is presumed to have been locked away in the northern realm of Freljord. It's here where he massacred hundreds, if not thousands, of men. We also have Zalani and Varus held in Ionia, at least until they were found by Valmar and Kai. There's also lesser known Darkin, such as the Shield Darkin Jarrell, held in Demacia, Naganeka in Noxus, and Styratu, held within the Caverns of Zorn. Point is, the Darkin are everywhere, and at any point they could pose a catastrophic threat to the people around them. By making the Darkin the primary antagonist, it would therefore give the player a chance to explore the different regions of the world, and meet the characters whose stories are entwined with the Darkin. The Darkin storyline also ties heavily to the Void, the Celestials, and the remaining Ascended, who are all other major antagonists the players will eventually face. As Riot are revealing more and more Darkin, it shows us another potential that this antagonist can have. Although there's finite Darkin, we don't actually know how many there were. This gives Riot a chance to iterate on the story further down the line. It also presents an opportunity to expand upon the already unique conflict that's going on between Zalani and the other Darkin. It remains to be seen what side of this conflict the player could end up on. Is there a world where we end up helping some of the Darkin to take down the Priestess? In my videos I'm going to start theory crafting on how Riot will implement characters and ideas into their game. Obviously speculation can be a dangerous thing, and build to unfounded demands, especially in game dev. So whilst I'm making predictions based on my experience and knowledge of the universe, it's not by any means make it true. So, with that in mind, I believe the Darkin will be the first major antagonist of the MMO. Whilst again this is still 100% speculation, there's a few key reasons why I think this is an educated guess. For starters, as previously mentioned, the Darkin are a fan favourite villain amongst existing League of Legends players. Although anecdotal, I've certainly seen stronger and more fervent reactions from the player base when new Darkin information or champions get revealed or announced. As is pointed out in this video, the Darkin lore is fantastic, and it ties together a lot of the current known locations within Runeterra. There's not really any other villain or subplot which can match the scale within the pre-existing lore, and Riot would ideally love to have the player travel all over the continents to experience the world. Finally, Riot's really on a Darkin kick right now. 2022 has been the year of the Darkin. At the start of the year we had a new short story that revealed to us the Priestess Zalani, which is fantastic and definitely worth a read. I'll leave a link to that and a couple of other Darkin related stories in the description. We're also currently receiving 3 phases of a Legends of Runeterra expansion, themed around the Darkin, and there will be a new Darkin character added to League, either late 2022 or early 2023. The card game expansion is revealing to us a ton of new Darkin and a bunch of lore to go alongside it. Given the MMO is still in early development, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say that this new Darkin development within the lore could link to some pitch from the MMO team to develop the story of the Darkin, as it would tie into their plans with the MMO. Like I said, it's all speculation, but if the Darkin are not the primary focus of the initial release of the MMO, I'm almost certain they will be the feature of a major expansion within the game at some point. We're still waiting on the full Darkin lore from the latest Legends of Runeterra expansion, and if new details drop around the Darkin, I will most likely make another video on the updated lore, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.